Captain Taman stood on the bridge of the steadfast horizon and watched the last evacuation ships leave the Velthian colony. The raiders were gone now, destroyed or scattered into the dark between stars. His crew had done their job well. 23 human ships against 40 raider vessels. The math should have favored the attackers. But math did not account for human determination. The communication console beeped. Taman expected thanks from the colony governor. Maybe an offer of supplies or shore leave for his tired crew. Instead, the Velthian's face filled the screen with barely hidden disgust. The governor said, her feathers ruffled in agitation. The threat is gone. Your ships must leave our system immediately. Your presence disturbs our people. Taman felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. Governor, my crew has been in combat for 16 hours. We need time to repair and rest. The governor interrupted him. We did not ask for your kind here. The council may require your service, but we do not want Deathworlders near our children. Leave within the hour. The screen went dark. Taman looked at his bridge crew. Every face showed the same tired acceptance. This was not new. This was every mission. Save them, protect them, then leave before they had to look at human faces too long. Taman said quietly, set course for the border station. Best speed. His first officer leaned closer and reported that engineering said 3 ships needed repairs. The crew needed rest. Taman replied, we will rest when we are away from here. He had been a soldier for 20 years. He had defended 47 different worlds. He could not remember the last time anyone had said thank you. 3 days later and 5,000 light-years away, Ambassador Hana walked into the Galactic Council chamber. She carried a datapad with humanity's latest proposal: equal representation, fair treatment, recognition of human contributions to galactic security. The same proposal she had presented 17 times before. The council members took their seats. Hundreds of species from across the galaxy. All of them had been saved by human soldiers at some point. All of them feared humans anyway. Counselor Vexithara spoke first. Her wings spread wide in a display of authority. Ambassador Hana, your proposal has been reviewed. The council must decline. Hana kept her voice calm. May I ask why? Humanity has served the council faithfully for 32 years. We have lost 14,000 soldiers defending your worlds. We ask only for equal standing. Vexithara answered, your species is too dangerous. You come from a death world. Violence is in your nature. We value your service, but we cannot grant you full membership. The risk is too great. Several council members nodded agreement. Another counselor stood and suggested that perhaps in another century, when humanity had proven it could control its aggressive tendencies, they might reconsider. Hana said, we control our tendencies every day. We control them when raiders attack your colonies. We control them when pirates threaten your trade routes. We control them when we die protecting species that will not even let us land on their worlds. Her hands clenched the datapad tighter. Vexithara said coldly, your passion proves our point. This discussion is closed. The council appreciates human military service. But membership requires more than strength. It requires trust. And humanity has not earned that trust. Hana looked around the chamber. She saw fear in their eyes. Fear of the very people who bled for them. She had spent 15 years trying to change their minds. Trying to show them that humans were more than warriors. That they were teachers and artists and scientists and friends. It had not mattered. It would never matter. Thank you for your time, counselors, Hana said. She bowed slightly and walked out. Behind her, the council members returned to other business. They had already forgotten her. That evening, Admiral Jiwan gathered Earth's leadership in a secure conference room. Holographic displays showed the current deployment of human forces. 300 ships spread across council space. 50,000 soldiers on various stations and outposts. Thousands of engineers and technicians keeping council infrastructure running. Hana reported, the proposal was rejected again. Same reasons as before. We are too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. She looked exhausted. Captain Taman spoke next and explained that the Velthians had ordered them off their world within an hour of saving them. No repairs, no rest, just leave before they frightened the children. Engineer Dewan pulled up her own reports. Her team had designed the new shield generators for the Paxson station. They had saved thousands of lives during last month's meteor storm. The station commander had given credit to his own engineers. Her people were not even mentioned in the report. Around the table, the stories continued. Disrespect, fear, ingratitude. The pattern was always the same. Humans did the dangerous work. Humans made the sacrifices. Then humans were pushed aside and forgotten. Admiral Ji-won listened to all of it. She was 63 years old. She had commanded human forces for 2 decades. She had seen good people die protecting aliens who would never even learn their names. She asked quietly, "How many more years do we do this? How many more lives do we spend earning respect that will never come?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew the question had been coming. They had all felt it. The slow weight of thankless service pressing down year after year. "What are you suggesting?" Hana asked. Ji-won stood and walked to the window. Earth turned slowly below, beautiful and blue and home. She said, "I am suggesting we stop. We withdraw all forces. We close our borders. We let the Council learn what life is like without humanity. They will face serious threats without us," Taemin said. But he did not sound opposed to the idea. He sounded hopeful. "They face serious threats now," Ji-won replied. "The difference is they will have to face those threats themselves. Maybe then they will understand what we have been doing for them all these years." "This is not revenge," Hana said slowly. "This is about self-respect." "Exactly," Ji-won turned to face them. "We are not attacking anyone. We are not threatening anyone. We are simply choosing not to serve people who do not value our service. That is our right." Dayun nodded and said she would need to retrieve her technology. The Council did not have the knowledge to maintain it. Without proper maintenance, those systems would fail within months. "Let them fail," Ji-won said. "Let the Council see the difference between having human protection and going without it. Then if they ever learn respect, we can discuss returning. But not before." She looked around the room, saw the same tired acceptance in every face. These were good people, dedicated people. They had given everything to the galaxy, and the galaxy had given them nothing but fear and contempt in return. "All in favor of complete withdrawal from Council affairs?" Ji-won asked. Every hand rose. No hesitation, no debate. The decision was unanimous. Admiral Ji-won activated the fleet-wide communication system. She thought carefully about her words. This message would reach every human serving in Council space. She wanted them to understand this was not failure. "This was dignity," she began. "To all human personnel serving under Council authority. Effective immediately, you are ordered to cease all operations and return to Earth. This is not a temporary reassignment. This is a complete withdrawal from galactic affairs. Pack your equipment, say your goodbyes if you wish, but come home. Our service is no longer required. More importantly, it is no longer offered." She paused, then added the most important part. "You have done nothing wrong. You have served with honor and courage, but we will no longer serve those who see us only as weapons to be feared, rather than people to be respected. The galaxy will learn to stand without us, and we will learn to live without the burden of protecting those who do not want our protection." The message ended. Across dozens of star systems, human soldiers and engineers and diplomats received their orders. Some felt relief, some felt sadness, but all of them understood. After 32 years of thankless service, humanity was finally going home. Admiral Ji-won looked out at Earth one more time. In 6 months, every human would be back. The borders would close, and the Galactic Council would face its own actions without human hands to catch them when they fell. She felt no anger, no satisfaction, only a quiet sense of peace. They had done their duty. More than their duty. Now it was time to step back and let others learn the lessons they had refused to hear. Ambassador Hana stood before the Galactic Council for the last time. The chamber was full as always. Hundreds of delegates from dozens of worlds. They sat comfortably in their seats, not knowing that everything was about to change. Hana did not waste time with long speeches. She simply said, "The human delegation is formally resigning from all council positions and responsibilities. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from galactic affairs. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. Goodbye." The chamber erupted in noise. Councilors shouted questions. Some laughed, thinking it was a negotiating tactic. Others looked worried. Vex Thara stood and demanded an explanation. Hana turned to face the avian counselor. "You said humanity has not earned your trust. Very well. We will no longer seek it. Good luck with your future endeavors." She walked out. Behind her, the council chamber descended into chaos, but Hana did not look back. She had spent 15 years trying to build bridges. Now it was time to go home. At the frontier station Kepler, Captain Taman supervised the evacuation of human forces. Ships that had been on patrol for months were docking one by one. Soldiers packed their equipment. Engineers dismantled their personal workstations. Everything that was human-made and could be moved was being loaded onto transports. Commander Zeltran, the station's second-in-command and an insectoid officer, watched the activity with disbelief. He approached Taman with his mandibles clicking in agitation. "You cannot be serious about this," Zeltran said. "Who will defend the frontier sectors?" "You will," Taman replied calmly. He handed over a data pad. "Here are the current threat assessments. Patrol routes, known pirate locations, everything my people compiled over the last 3 years." Zeltran took the pad with his lower arms while his upper arms gestured in frustration. He said that Council forces could not cover all these routes. They did not have enough ships, not enough trained personnel. "Then you will need to request reinforcements," Taman said, "or accept that some sectors will be less protected. These are your decisions now, Commander. I am sure the Council will provide guidance." Zeltran's voice took on a harsh tone. "This is abandonment. What about the colonies that depend on your patrols?" Taman stopped and turned. His expression was not angry, just tired. "We have been protecting those colonies for 3 decades. We have bled for them, died for them, and they have never once welcomed us. They fear us. They despise us. They order us away the moment danger passes. That is not a partnership, Commander. That is servitude, and we are done serving." He walked away to oversee the final loading procedures. Zeltran stood holding the datapad, finally understanding that the humans were not bluffing. They were really leaving. On the research station, Mendel, Engineer Daun, worked quickly and efficiently. She moved through the shield generator room with her team, disconnecting components and downloading critical data. The station's alien chief engineer followed her, protesting every action. "These systems are Council property," the chief engineer insisted. He was a reptilian species with scales that changed color with his emotions. Currently, they were bright red with anger. "These systems are human-designed," Daun corrected. "Every innovation, every efficiency improvement, all of it came from my team. You claimed it as yours. You even erased our names from the technical documentation. Well, now you can maintain it yourselves." She removed a critical processing unit and placed it carefully in a transport case. The chief engineer protested that without that component, the shields would operate at only 40% efficiency. "Then I suggest you learn quickly how to build a replacement," Daun said. She left behind basic schematics on a datapad, not out of kindness, but because she was a professional. The fundamental principles are there. If you cannot figure out the advanced systems, perhaps you should have been more honest about who created them in the first place. Her team finished packing. 32 human engineers who had been maintaining the station for 5 years. They walked to the docking bay together, leaving behind confused alien technicians who were just beginning to realize how much they had depended on human expertise. Back in the council chambers, the emergency session had been going on for 6 hours. Councilors argued and debated and pointed fingers. Some blamed humanity for being too sensitive. Others blamed Vexithara for pushing too hard. None of them had solutions. Diplomat Farion stood to speak. He was an aquatic species who rarely involved himself in council politics. But this situation demanded his attention. "Honored councilors," he said, his voice carrying the slight gurgle of his water-breathing species, "we have made a terrible mistake. For 30 years, humanity has protected our borders, defended our colonies, and asked nothing in return except respect. We gave them none. Now they are gone and we act surprised." Vexithara interrupted with an irritated click of her beak. "They will return. This is merely a dramatic gesture. Humans are emotional creatures. They will calm down and realize they need council trade and technology." "Will they?" Farion asked. "Humanity has its own technology now, much of it superior to ours, as we are about to discover. They have their own trade networks within their territory. They do not need us. We need them, and we have treated them with nothing but contempt." Other councilors muttered among themselves. Some nodded agreement, but most still seemed convinced this was temporary. They could not imagine a galaxy where humans were not there to solve their problems. The council leader called for order and suggested they send a diplomatic mission to Earth. Offer better terms. Promise improvements. Surely we can negotiate a return to the previous arrangement. The previous arrangement was the problem, Farion said quietly. But his words were lost in the noise of debate. 3 months passed. Every human had returned to Earth or human-controlled space. Not a single soldier, not a single diplomat, not a single engineer remained in Council territory. It was the most complete and organized withdrawal anyone had ever seen. The Council sent 3 diplomatic missions to Earth. All 3 were turned away at the border with the same polite automated message. Humanity was no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect their territorial boundaries. Further attempts at contact would not receive responses. Trade ships that tried to approach human space were redirected to designated neutral ports. No hostility, no threats, just firm boundaries and silence. Admiral G1 sat in her office on Earth reviewing reports. Every human ship was accounted for. Every soldier was home. The withdrawal had been executed perfectly. Not a single life lost. Not a single incident of violence. Humanity had simply walked away with dignity. Her aide entered with the latest intelligence from Council space. Pirate activity was increasing. Several colonies had requested emergency assistance. 3 border skirmishes had occurred that would normally have been prevented by human patrols. Should we respond to any of the distress calls? The aide asked. No, G1 said firmly. We warned them what would happen. Now they must learn the lesson. Monitor the situation, but do not intervene. The Council chose to stand without us. Let them stand. The aide nodded and left. G1 looked out her window at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost. But understanding came too late. Humanity had closed its doors. She thought about all the people who had served. The ones who had died defending alien worlds. The ones who had been treated like monsters despite their sacrifices. They deserved this peace. They deserved to live without constantly proving their worth to people who would never appreciate it. The Council would send more diplomatic missions. They would make promises. They would offer trade deals and technology exchanges. But G1 knew none of it mattered. Words were easy. Respect was earned through action. And the Council had shown through 3 decades of actions exactly what they thought of humanity. Let them learn to defend themselves. Let them struggle with the problems they had always relied on humans to solve. Maybe then, years from now, if they truly changed, there could be a conversation. But not now. Not until the Council understood that partnership required mutual respect. Admiral G1 turned back to her work. Earth needed her attention now. The galaxy would have to take care of itself. 6 months had passed since the last human left Council space. Commander Zeltran stood in the command center of Frontier Station Kepler and stared at the tactical display with growing dread. Red markers showed pirate activity across 8 sectors. 4 distress calls blinked urgently. 2 colonies were under active attack. He had 3 patrol ships available. 3 ships to cover territory that humans had protected with 20. Which colony do we help? His tactical officer asked. Zeltran felt his mandibles click together in frustration. Before, he would never have to make this choice. Human patrols would have intercepted the pirates long before they reached any colony. Now he had to choose which innocent people would receive help and which would have to fend for themselves. Send ships to Colony Praxis, he decided. It has the larger population. Send emergency protocols to Colony Westfall. Tell them to evacuate to the inner system. The officer hesitated before asking if they should request human assistance. After all, these were civilian lives at stake. Surely the humans would respond to an emergency. No, Zeltran said quietly. We made our choice when we treated them like monsters. Now we live with the consequences. By the time Council ships reached Colony Westfall, the pirates had already struck. 15,000 people dead. Infrastructure destroyed. The survivors had nothing but anger for the Council that had failed to protect them. Zeltran read the casualty reports and thought about Captain Taiman. The human had tried to tell him, had warned him about the security gaps. Zeltran had dismissed it as fear tactics. Now 15,000 people had paid the price for his arrogance. On Research Station Mendel, alarms blared throughout the facility. The chief engineer ran through corridors, his scales flashing between yellow and orange with panic. The shield generators were failing. A meteor storm was approaching. Without full shields, the station would suffer catastrophic damage. He reached the generator room and found his team staring helplessly at the malfunctioning equipment. They had followed the basic schematics that Daun left behind. They understood the principles. But the advanced systems were failing in ways they could not diagnose. "Where is the human engineer?" someone asked desperately. "Gone," the chief engineer said bitterly. "All of them. Back to Earth. And they took their knowledge with them." The meteor storm hit 30 minutes later. The shields held at 40% power, just as Da-Un had warned. Dozens of small meteors penetrated the weakened defenses. 3 laboratory modules were breached. 2 scientists died. Decades of research were destroyed. The chief engineer stood in the damaged corridor and remembered how he had dismissed the human engineers. How he had taken credit for their work. How he had insisted they were not really necessary. The broken modules around him told a different story. The economic problems spread more slowly but just as surely. Trade routes that had been safe for decades became dangerous. Merchant ships hired expensive private security. Insurance costs skyrocketed. Some routes were abandoned entirely when the risk became too high. Planets that had grown rich on interstellar trade began to suffer shortages. Medical supplies, rare minerals, manufactured goods, all of it had flowed freely when human warships kept the space lanes clear. Now convoys moved slowly and carefully, afraid of every sensor contact. The Council tried to hire mercenary fleets, but mercenaries were expensive and unreliable. They protected their contracted ships but ignored distress calls from others. They negotiated for higher pay whenever danger increased. Some were barely better than pirates themselves. Councilors who had voted against human membership began receiving angry messages from their constituents. Businesses demanded action. Colonies wanted protection. Everyone wanted to know why the Council had driven away the one species that had kept them all safe. An emergency council session was called. The chamber was tense. Councillor Vexithara looked older now, her feathers dull with stress. The last 6 months had been difficult for everyone, but especially for those who had led the opposition to human integration. Diplomat Farion presented the latest casualty figures. 23 colonies attacked, 42,000 dead, infrastructure damage in the billions. And these were just the direct costs. The economic impact was much larger. "We must contact humanity again," Farion said. "Apologize. Offer better terms. Whatever it takes to restore the partnership." Vexthara stood slowly. Her voice was defensive. That would be admitting we were wrong. It would show weakness. Other species would question our judgment. "We were wrong," another counselor said bluntly. 42,000 dead proves it. How many more must die before we admit our mistake? The debate raged for hours. Some counselors wanted to apologize immediately. Others insisted they could solve the problems themselves given more time. A few still clung to the belief that humans were too dangerous to trust, despite all evidence that the real danger was their absence. In the end, they voted narrowly to wait. To try harder with their own forces. To prove they did not need humanity. Pride was a powerful force even in the face of mounting disasters. Farion left the chamber feeling hollow. He had warned them. For years he had warned them. Now people were dying and the Council was still too proud to admit its mistakes. Then the long-range sensors picked up something that made all previous problems seem small. A fleet was approaching Council space from the galactic east. Hundreds of ships moving in perfect formation. The signatures matched a species the Council knew well. The Krell Dominion. The Krell were an aggressive empire that had been slowly expanding for centuries. They conquered weak species and enslaved strong ones. For the last 30 years they had been quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Waiting and watching. Commander Zeltran received the intelligence report and immediately understood why they had been quiet. They had been watching the humans, waiting to see if the stories about human combat effectiveness were true, and now that the humans were gone, the Krell saw opportunity. The Krell ambassador delivered their message to the Council with cold arrogance. Submit to Dominion authority or be conquered. The Council had 1 week to decide. Military analysts ran the projections. Without human forces, the Council fleet could not stop a Krell invasion. They might delay it. They might make it costly. But they would lose. And hundreds of billions of people would fall under Krell rule. Councillor Vexthara sat alone in her office and reviewed old security footage. Human soldiers fighting pirates. Human ships defending colonies. Human engineers working late into the night on shield generators. All the service she had dismissed as dangerous. All the help she had feared. She watched Captain Tae Min leading an evacuation during a raider attack, saw him carry a wounded Velthian child to safety while enemy fire tore through the air around him. That child was alive because a human had risked his life, and Tae Min's reward had been an order to leave the system immediately. For the first time, Vexithara truly understood what they had done. Humans were not the monsters. The monsters were coming now, and humanity was not there to stop them. The Council had 1 week to decide: submit to the Krell or fight a war they could not win, and the people who could have saved them, the people who had always saved them, were silent behind closed borders that the Council's own prejudice had created. The first battle with the Krell lasted 4 hours. Commander Zeltran led the Council fleet with everything he had learned from decades of military service. His ships outnumbered the Krell advance force 3-1. He had superior positioning. He had detailed tactical plans. It did not matter. The Krell fought with brutal efficiency. They accepted losses that would make any Council commander retreat. They adapted to tactics within minutes. They pushed forward relentlessly, trading ships for position without hesitation. Zeltran found himself constantly reacting, never attacking. His captains hesitated at critical moments. His formations broke under pressure. Everything that should have worked failed against an enemy that simply did not care about casualties. Halfway through the battle, Zeltran finally understood what made human soldiers so effective. It was not superior weapons or better ships. It was the willingness to fight when fighting was hard. The determination to hold position when holding position hurt. The refusal to break even when breaking made sense. Humans were deathworlders. They came from a planet that tried to kill them every day. They had evolved to face impossible odds with stubborn courage. That was what the Council had called violence and aggression. That was what the Council had feared. And that was exactly what the Council needed now. Zeltran ordered retreat after losing 42 ships. The Krell lost 70, but continued advancing. They had hundreds more. 3 Council colonies fell within the week. The populations were given a choice: submit or die. Most submitted. Those who resisted were made examples. Refugee ships flooded the inner systems, millions of people fleeing the Krell advance. They came with stories of brutality that made even the Council's worst fears about humans seem foolish by comparison. The Krell did not fear their subjects. They simply crushed resistance with overwhelming violence. One refugee was a Velthian mother with 3 children. She had lived on the colony world of Praxis, the same world that Captain Tae Min had defended from pirates months ago. She told her story to anyone who would listen. The Krell had come without warning. No negotiation, no mercy. They had bombed population centers to force surrender. Her oldest child had died in the initial attack. Her mate had been killed trying to protect their home. She and her 2 surviving children had escaped on the last transport. "We were afraid of the humans," she said, her voice hollow with grief. "We thought they were dangerous. We ordered them away from our world because we feared them near our children. Now my child is dead because the humans were not there to stop the real monsters." Her story spread across the inner worlds. Others told similar tales. People who had lived in safety for decades suddenly understood what that safety had cost, and they understood who had paid the price for their ignorance. Counselor Vexithara had not slept properly in weeks. She spent her nights reviewing records, reading reports, watching archived footage of human service. Every file showed the same pattern. Humans risking everything, humans making sacrifices, humans saving lives, and every file showed Council species responding with fear and contempt. Orders to leave, restrictions on movement, denial of basic respect. 30 years of faithful service met with 30 years of institutionalized prejudice. She found a particular report that made her stop reading. It was a casualty list from a battle 8 years ago. Human soldiers defending a mining station from raiders. 17 humans died that day. The station commander had not even bothered to learn their names. The report listed them as human casualties without identification. Vexithara looked up each name individually, found their service records, read about their lives. One had been a father of 3. Another had been an artist who painted during off-duty hours. A third had been studying xenobiology, hoping to build better understanding between species. They had been people, real people with families and dreams and hopes. and they had died protecting others who could not be bothered to remember their names. For the first time since the crisis began, Counselor Vexthera wept. The emergency council session was different this time. The chamber was quieter. Fear had replaced arrogance. 38 members had been replaced by alternates as their homeworlds fell to Krell conquest. Everyone understood this was existential. Diplomat Farion stood to speak. He had prepared a proposal for requesting human aid. The terms were generous. Full council membership, equal representation, formal apologies, recognition of past service. Everything that should have been offered 3 decades ago. Before he could present it, Vexthera stood. Her wings were folded tight against her body in a posture of shame. Many counselors looked surprised. She had been the loudest voice against human integration. Now she looked broken. Honored counselors, she began, her voice quiet. I was wrong. For 30 years I argued against humanity. I called them dangerous, violent, unpredictable. I prevented their integration into our society. I ensured they remained second-class participants despite their service. She paused, fighting emotion. And I was wrong about everything. The humans were not dangerous to us. They were our protectors. The violence I feared was the courage we needed. The unpredictability I cited was simply human creativity in solving problems we could not solve ourselves. Now we face real violence, real danger, and the people who could save us are gone because of decisions I championed. I support any proposal to contact humanity, but I believe I should lead the delegation. This is my mistake to own. The chamber was silent. Finally, Farion spoke. He said that Vexthera's acknowledgement was important, but this delegation needed to include voices who had supported humanity from the beginning. It could not seem like just a political maneuver. The council voted unanimously to send the delegation. Vexthera and Farion would lead. Commander Zeltrin would accompany them to present the military situation. They would carry formal apologies, offers of full partnership, and one simple request. Help us. 3 days later, the delegation arrived at Earth's border. They were not turned away this time. A human patrol ship met them and escorted them to a diplomatic station in orbit around Earth. The planet turned below them, blue and green and beautiful. It looked peaceful, safe. Everything the council worlds were not. Admiral Jiwan received them in a conference room with windows overlooking Earth. She wore her uniform. Her posture was formal but not hostile. She listened as they presented their case. Vexthera spoke first. She delivered the formal apology. Acknowledged the council's failures, admitted their prejudice, and explained how it had been wrong. Her voice cracked several times, but she finished. Farion presented the offer. Full membership, equal representation, recognition and honor for all past service. Fair treatment guaranteed by new council laws. Zeltrin showed the military situation. Projections of Krell advance, casualty estimates, time until the core worlds fell. The message was clear. Without human help, the council would cease to exist. When they finished, Jiwan sat quietly for a moment. Then she spoke. Jiwan said, "Your apology is accepted. Your admission of error is appreciated. The offer of equal partnership is noted. But understand this. Humanity will not return to being your unpaid protectors. We will not be the galaxy's soldiers while being treated as second-class beings. If we help, it will be as genuine equals. Partners, not servants." "That is what we offer," Vexthera said quickly. "True partnership." "Words are easy," Jiwan replied. "Actions matter. The Council must prove it has truly changed before humanity commits forces. You need to show us that this crisis has taught real lessons, that you understand what respect means." Farion asked what humanity needed to see. Jiwan considered carefully. "Fight," she said. "Fight with everything you have. Show courage, show determination. Prove you are willing to stand for yourselves. Then, when you have earned that respect, we will stand beside you. Not ahead of you. Beside you." The delegation left with hope, but also understanding. Humanity would not simply rescue them. The Council had to prove it deserved rescue. They had to show they had learned from their mistakes. Admiral Jiwan watched their ship depart. Ambassador Hana joined her at the window. "Do you think they can do it?" Hana asked. "Fight hard enough to prove themselves?" "I do not know," Jiwan admitted. "But they need to try, for their own sake as much as ours. A partnership built on desperation will not last. A partnership built on mutual respect might." Earth's borders remained closed. But now humanity watched carefully, waiting to see if the Council could prove itself worthy of the alliance it had thrown away. Councillor Vexithara returned to Council space with a heavy heart. The humans had given them a chance, but it came with conditions. The Council had to prove itself. They had to fight. They had to show courage they had never needed before because humans had always been there to protect them. The first thing she did was propose new legislation. Laws that guaranteed equal treatment for all defensive forces, recognition for service, monuments for those who had fallen protecting Council worlds. She made sure human names were included, all 14,000 who had died over 3 decades. The Council passed the laws unanimously. Not because they hoped it would bring humans back immediately, but because it was right, because those names deserved to be remembered. Commander Zeltran prepared for the battle that would define the Council's future. The Krell Armada was approaching the Sentinel system, a critical stronghold that protected 5 heavily populated worlds. If Sentinel fell, the way to the Council's core worlds would be open. Zeltran had learned from his previous defeats. He studied human tactical records, read after-action reports from battles fought years ago. He saw patterns he had missed before. Humans did not win through superior force. They won through absolute commitment to their objectives. He gathered his commanders and explained the situation clearly. They were outnumbered. They would take heavy losses. Some of them would not survive, but they could not retreat. Not this time. The people behind them were depending on them to hold the line. "We have lived for decades knowing humans would protect us," Zeltran said. "We never had to truly risk ourselves because they risked themselves for us. Now we must stand on our own, fight as they fought, with courage, with determination. No matter the cost," his commanders understood. For the first time, Council forces would not retreat at the first sign of heavy casualties. They would hold position. They would fight like Deathworlders even though they were not. The Battle of Sentinel System lasted 19 hours. The Krell came in overwhelming force. Their ships hammered the Council defense lines with brutal firepower. Zeltran's fleet began taking casualties within the first 30 minutes, but they held position. When ships were damaged, they stayed in formation. When commanders were killed, their seconds took command and continued fighting. They adapted to Krell tactics. They covered each other's weaknesses. They fought with a determination that surprised even themselves. Captain Kale, a young officer who had never commanded in real combat, found himself leading 3 destroyers after his squadron commander was killed. He remembered reading about Captain Taemon's defense of the Velthian colony, how human ships had held against superior numbers through sheer refusal to break. Kale ordered his ships to form a defensive triangle. They locked weapons and engines together, creating a single defensive point that could cover all angles. It was a human tactic, risky, inflexible, but effective when holding position mattered more than maneuverability. 2 of his 3 ships were destroyed, but they held long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Long enough to stop the Krell breakthrough at that section of the line. Kale survived, barely, and became a hero to his species. The battle turned slowly. Not because Council ships were suddenly better, but because they refused to give up. The Krell were used to enemies that broke, that retreated when losses became severe. Council forces did neither. They held, they fought. They died in place rather than abandon their positions. By hour 15, the Krell advance had stalled. By hour 17, they were taking unsustainable losses. By hour 19, they withdrew, not defeated entirely, but stopped. For the first time since the invasion began, the Council had won a major battle. The cost was heavy. 247 ships destroyed, 32,000 casualties, but the Sentinel system held, 5 worlds remained free, and the Council military learned that they could stand and fight if they chose to. Admiral Jiwan watched the battle reports from Earth. Human intelligence had been monitoring the situation closely. She saw the Council fleet holding position under fire, saw them taking casualties without retreating, saw them fighting with the kind of determination she had only seen in human forces before. Ambassador Hana stood beside her. They both knew what this meant. The council was proving itself. Not perfectly, not without terrible cost, but they were learning. They are trying, Hana said quietly. They are, Jiwon agreed. The question is whether we help now or wait to see if they can sustain it. Captain Taemin entered the command center. He had been reviewing the tactical data in detail. He said that the council forces had used human doctrine in several places. Not perfectly, but well enough to matter. They were learning from human examples. They are trying to fight like us because they have no other reference for this kind of combat, Taemin said. But the fact they are trying at all means something. They could have surrendered. They chose to fight. Jiwon made her decision. She sent a message to diplomat Farion. A simple message. Humanity would deploy forces to support the council defense. Not to lead it. Not to take over. But to stand alongside council forces as equals in the fight against the Krell. 3 days later, human warships arrived at the front lines. The council fleet greeted them not with relief but with respect. Commander Zeltran contacted Admiral Jiwon directly to coordinate strategy. They planned the next battle together. Human ships would take the left flank. Council ships would hold the center and right. They would fight as partners, each bringing their strengths to the engagement. Human aggression and adaptability combined with council discipline and coordination. The next Krell assault hit harder than before. But this time they faced a combined force that knew how to fight together. Human ships pushed forward aggressively, creating openings. Council ships held defensive positions, preventing breakthroughs. When human vessels were damaged, council ships covered their retreat. When council formations weakened, human forces reinforced them. It was not perfect coordination. Mistakes were made. Communication sometimes failed, but it worked because both sides were committed to making it work. They were not protector and protected. They were allies. The Krell were pushed back again. Then again. Over the following months, the tide of war slowly turned. The Dominion had expected an easy conquest. Instead, they faced determined resistance that cost them dearly for every system they tried to take. Eventually, the Krell proposed a ceasefire. They would retain the territory they had already taken but advance no further. The Council, strengthened by human partnership, countered with demands for complete withdrawal from Council space. After tense negotiations, the Krell agreed. The cost of continuing the war had become too high. When the war ended, Councillor Vexthara stood before the council chamber one more time. But this time she stood beside Ambassador Hana. They presented a new treaty together. Not a treaty of service. A treaty of genuine alliance. Humanity would rejoin the galactic community as full equals. Human representatives would have equal votes in council decisions. Human soldiers would serve alongside council forces, not beneath them. And most importantly, the galaxy would remember what it cost to drive away its protectors, would remember the lessons learned through terrible loss. The treaty passed unanimously, but the real change was not in the words on the document. It was in the way council members looked at the human delegation. Not with fear, not with contempt, but with respect earned through shared sacrifice. Captain Taemin stood in the memorial hall on the council capital world. The walls were covered with names. Thousands upon thousands of names. Every person who had died defending council space over the last 30 years. Human names, council names, side by side without distinction. He found the section with the names of soldiers from his old unit, friends who had died defending worlds that feared them. He touched the wall gently. Commander Zeltran approached and stood beside him. The insectoid officer had become a friend during the months of fighting together. They had bled alongside each other, saved each other's lives, built something new from the ashes of old mistakes. They deserved better than they received, Zeltran said quietly, looking at the names. Yes, Taemin agreed, but perhaps now their sacrifice means something more. Not just protection given and dismissed, but the foundation of something better, true partnership. They stood together in silence, honoring the dead and hoping the living would remember the lessons written in blood and sacrifice. Months turned to years. The alliance grew stronger. Human and council species learned to work together as genuine equals. Trade flourished. Cultural exchanges became common. Children of different species grew up knowing each other not as threats or mysteries, but as friends and neighbors. The humans did not forget what had happened. The withdrawal. The rejection. the long, painful road to mutual respect. But they also did not hold endless grudges. They had made their point. They had taught their lesson. Now they could move forward. Admiral Jiwan retired eventually, satisfied that humanity's place in the galaxy was secure, not because they were feared, not because they were needed, but because they were respected. That respect had cost them dearly, but it had been worth the price. The galaxy moved forward, stronger for having learned what it meant to value those who stood in defense of others.